What if we could turn this weedy field here, this weedy part of the field, into something beautiful, like this diverse native stand over here? What if we could do that? And what if the problem here is not really the weed? Here's a Queen Anne's lace, a bull nettle, some ragweed. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But what if the problem is not really the weed? What if the problem is that we have bare space? We have open space. The plants are not filling this. We need a diversity of plants. Today, we're going to explore how we need to create a diverse ecosystem full of plants that is filling the space. It's creating a living shield so that we don't have the weed problems. Let's go into the field and explore this today. So what we want is a full plant community like this, not a leaky plant community like this. We want our shield strong. This is what's going to protect against weeds. We don't want open space. Let me show you that in another way that might be easier to visualize. If this is our bare ground, if we call this Mother Nature, she has a bare bottom right now, and she does not like that. She likes to be clothed. And so what we're going to do is we're going to clothe her with plants. These are our little imaginary plants. And so let's plant some plants out here. We don't have enough plants, as it turns out, to fill our whole thing, which is one of the points. We have got to get a full stand of plants out here. If we just have a few plants out here, we have got so much bare ground. Mother Nature is only a quarter covered here, and she feels a little bare, and she doesn't like that. So she's going to put weeds in these spots. This is what we would call a leaky shield. We want a full and vibrant shield. So let's scoot our plants up where they're next to each other, and let's just pay attention to this one little area here. So we've got our shield, and these are, let's say, our grass plants. They're kind of shaped like a grass plant. They're big, they're robust, they cover a lot of ground. You know, specifically, maybe these are warm season grass plants. Well, this is great. So we've got a great warm season grass stand here, but we've still got actually some space in here. It's not as bad as it was when they were all scattered out, but let's put some things that fit in between. Let's put some wildflowers in here. A lot of times wildflowers are not shaped in the same way that the grasses are. The wildflowers are kind of skinny. That's not always true. That's a generalization. But if we put our wildflowers in here between these, and a lot of times you can even fit multiple wildflowers between the grasses, then all of a sudden we've got a more vibrant, more full shield here than we did have without these wildflowers in there. And wildflowers is just a fancy word to say forbs or broadleaf plants. The native legumes are also included in this. But to make our shield even more covered, something else we want to do is not just have the warm season grasses. Let's put some cool season grasses in here as well. And these blue tape rolls can be the cool season grasses. And unfortunately, they're not quite to scale, because a lot of times the cool season grasses are smaller than the warm season grasses. So if we've got our cool season grasses scattered out here, well, what actually happens is there's more overlap than this. So we've got our cool season grass, but our warm season grasses grow at a different time of year. Okay, so in the spring, let's take our warm seasons off, or maybe they're thatched. The dead material, if we haven't burned, is actually covering the ground. But what you've got is you've got a few of these cool season grasses. Some of the forbs and legumes are also green at that time of year. And so let's put them out here. For instance, like a white beard tongue, a gray-headed coneflower, they will be green that time of year. And then as we get on into summer, we fill in our solar collector. So the warm season grasses start coming on, and they just start covering up the cool season grasses, because the cool season grasses, their time for the year is done. So we put in our warm season grasses. Oh, and then of course, we've got more of the wildflowers coming in. And some of these wildflowers are now gone. And so here's more wildflowers that do their thing during the summer. And some, like the gray-headed coneflower, is blooming up in the summer. So it actually has a presence in the spring and in the summer. But each plant has its own growth season. And when we get diversity of plants, we've got so much better ground cover. We are protecting the ground. We are shielding the ground from sunlight. So there's two big things, two big concepts probably that we're after here. One of those concepts is we need to fill the niches, and we do that with diversity. So in other words, if all we have, back to the warm season grasses, if all we have is these warm season grasses, there's nothing filling this niche. There's nothing filling the niche of October, November, December, April, March. There's nothing filling that niche because these grasses grow in the summer. And you will end up in warm season grass fields. Some of the biggest complaints we hear are, hey, it's being invaded by weeds. In other words, Mother Nature didn't like to be bare. And so something was put there, and it was probably a Queen Anne's lace or a cheatgrass or something that wasn't very desirable. So just warm season grasses is not the answer. If we just have the forbs and legumes or the wildflowers, that's also not the answer. Because look at all of this bare ground between them. They don't tend to have the leaf. A grass plant, this is not much of a grass plant here in the shade, but you can see it even here. The grass plant is like arching over, those leaves cover space. This is just a ragweed. It's not a very special native forb. A lot of us don't think, because it is kind of weedy in its tendencies. It is native and the quail really like it. But nonetheless, you can see that the shape of this is very much upright. It doesn't shade the ground like these grasses do. So here we have just wildflowers, but we're sure not shading the ground there and covering the ground. We have to fill all the niches. We need plants that are reaching out with their leaves. We need plants that are going upright with their leaves. We need plants that are trailing across the ground. We need plants that are growing in the spring. We need plants that are growing in the summer. We need plants that are growing in the fall. We need those that are actually green during the winter as well. And so we're just trying to fill all of these different niches. That's our goal. Another goal is we need to produce lots of biomass. There's actually a problem that we run into with some of the weeds when sunlight gets to the ground. When Mother Nature's bottom is so bare that the sunlight gets down to it, a lot of times we get a flush of weed seed germination. And that's because a lot of the weed seeds, or at least some of them, are triggered to germinate by sunlight hitting that seed. There's actually a mechanism in that seed that says, hey, if I don't get sunlight, I won't germinate. And the reason for that is because if it's covered by a huge big bluestem plant, for instance, well, how could it compete with that grass if it's already got a head start on it? So you might as well wait until the conditions are better, spend another couple years in the soil, so that you have a hope of actually making it up and having a space in the canopy to do your thing and complete your life cycle. So not only do we want to fill all the niches with a diversity of plants, but we need a lot of biomass. And this is particularly a problem with plantings that are just wildflower plantings. We really don't have the biomass out there to shade the ground, and then we end up with the weeds. Now here we are back in the field. Let's start with our cool season grasses because they come on first. And again, some of the native forbs and legumes also come on early. But this is one of the cool season grasses. This is one of the wild rye. There's a variety of them wild rye. There's one here, there's one over here. So there's actually quite a few of them in here when you get to looking, but this is not the time. We are almost the 1st of August. This is not the time of year to see wild rye or any of the cool seasons. There's a bunch of the native sedges out here. And they're actually down low. And when I say sedge, don't think broom sedge, don't think yellow nut sedge. It's a totally different thing. But they're down low in under these other plants, and we just can't pick them out right now because it's not their time of year. But they do their thing, obviously at a different time of year, and they're important to have then. So we've got our cool season grasses. Obviously, we've got our warm season grasses. This is a lot of big blue stem out here. There will be some Indian grass, but it is not thrown up its seed heads. Actually, here's an Indian grass right here. So a lot of different warm season grasses out here. There'll be some eastern gamma grass when we get down there in a little wetter part of the field. There'll be some switchgrass out here. So each of these grasses also have a different growth form, and you can actually see that. This big blue stem, it's very soft and the leaves are very fountain-like, if you will. And then it's going to bolt earlier than this Indian grass here. So the Indian grass, this head doesn't belong to it. They're so close together that wild rye head is actually coming out of the ground at the same place as that Indian grass. So this Indian grass is very pokey looking, and it bolts a little later. So each thing has its own growth period, even within, like, say, the warm season grass growth, functional diversity group is what we call it, a group that functions much the same way in the environment. So this is the native warm season grasses, and then we've got the native legumes. Here's a tick trefoil. Here, there's also the native forbs, and I often group the forbs and legumes together because the forbs and legumes, the legumes is just a subset of the forbs. And again, you could call forbs wildflowers or pollinator plants. They're all the same words, meaning, hey, they kind of bloom pretty and they have a flower for the pollinators. But this is one of the forbs that's not a legume. This is oxeye sunflower, wonderful plant. Has both a growth cycle and season now. Obviously it's blooming and covering the ground, but it also greens up fairly early in the spring. Here's one called brown-eyed Susan. Brown-eyed Susan is a wonderful little forb. It's related to the black-eyed Susans. There's a wild bergamot. It's kind of done. It has had its flower already this year, and so it's turned into a seed pod, and then we still have the leaves covering the ground. So you can just see the diversity of plants out here that is shading the ground and covering the ground, and that just doesn't leave space for the weeds to come in. And that is why there's nothing different between where we started this video and that little weedy spot. There's no management that's been done different there than there is out here. We're in the same exact field. The difference is we've got plants covering the ground here. Now, if you are looking at a new planting, and it all depends on how you established it, if you used any herbicides that are helping you out with the annual weed control, but very likely it is not looking like this. These plants have an amazing root system. They say that on one big blue stem plant, just one plant, if you stack the roots end to end, they would be 25 miles long. I mean, that's amazing. But they don't start out that way, right? They start out as a little seed, and then they have a little 1/16 of an inch root, and then it becomes 1/8 of an inch, and then 1/4. And it just takes time to develop the massive plant that this is. Even these wildflowers, a lot of them will have a really big root system too, and it takes time to develop that root system. These are perennials after all. So in a new planting, we've got a problem. And that problem is that our perennials are not developed, and we have got Mother Nature, her bottom is bare. Because you think about it, we planted that seed in the winter or the spring, and it was bare. We wanted it bare. We wanted everything dead in most cases. And so now the sunlight is hitting that ground. It has been hitting that ground all spring, all summer, and the weeds are loving it. It's like, there is nothing growing here. It is my time to do its thing. And so that's what the annual weeds do. But so we don't have the ground covered, but it's coming. We just have to be patient. And that's where we joke that you should go to Hawaii for 3 years, come back and see if it's been a success. But just be patient through that ugly period. You can do some mowing to reduce the canopy of those weeds sometimes, or sometimes there's an herbicide option. It just depends on what you planted and what your weed problem is as well. But be patient through the first years. What you're looking at is the future. This, in a mature planting, this is when you want the ground covered. You don't want half stand. You want a good, thick, full stand. You want to fill all the niches. You want it taking sunlight, moisture, and nutrients at different times of the year. And you want to produce lots of biomass, lots of plant material to just shade that ground level. And so that is our goal, to control the weeds naturally. Because we're using diversity, we're using Mother Nature's own design, the design that was here when these grasslands first became. Those grasslands had this secret, and we're copying that when we do these plantings. We're learning from nature. We're doing biomimicry, mimicking nature. You may think when you're planting, I want to plant wildflowers, or I want to plant these warm season grasses for summer forage. But actually what you're wanting to do is build a strong community, a plant community, an ecosystem, if you will. And why you want to do that is because it makes this shield. Nothing's perfect. Nothing's going to take out every weed, but it'll sure help if we have filled our canopy up. We have a good full stand. We have the different niches being filled, different seasons of the year, different heights, different growth patterns being filled, and we're producing a lot of biomass to help cover the ground. Those are some of the secrets. And as we design mixes at Hamilton Native Outpost here, those are things that are running through our mind. We want everything. We want these different functional diversity groups, from the deep-rooted grasses to the legumes that are fixing nitrogen. There's so many different components that we're factoring in there as we design these mixes to fit different goals. Mixes for landscaping, mixes for grazing. Those are not the same thing, but a lot of the same concepts is what we're looking at and trying to get full stands. So if you have questions about mixes, check them out on our website. Or also, if you're not sure, you get there and you're like, gosh, I don't quite know which one's for me. I think my situation's unique, or I just want to talk to somebody. Send us a message. We'd love to talk with you and chat with you about it. I'm Elizabeth with Hamilton Native Outpost, and it's my pleasure to be out here in this grassland on a beautiful late July morning. Thanks for watching.
We at Hamilton Native Outpost make these videos to share the unique knowledge that we have gained from over 40 years of working with native plants as we raise and sell native grass and wildflower seeds. If you found this video helpful, we need your help to get the message out. Please subscribe, share, like, and comment. It helps others to find us. Thank you.